Hi, everyone. Welcome back to more Gravity Sketch VR modeling tips and tricks. And I'm going to talk about all the questions. These are buzzing a little bit because of the resolution, so I'll put those off to the side. I made one first page larger. So this is a continuation of the Gravity Sketch webinar that I did yesterday. Thanks for everybody showing up. And since we didn't have a lot of time, Jaron went through and pulled the questions out of the chat that either I hadn't answered during the chat or the webinar and presented them here. He sent them to me today. So while I still have momentum, I thought I would jump in and try and answer some of these. So can they create a workspace preset? I think you're talking about the presets. So in regards to the workspace that I use in lighting, etc. So let me just show you how to do that because it's very simple to do yourself. So when you go to the gear, let's get a clear background behind this menu. So when you go here to the gear, these are all your top level menus on the left. And go to the gear, you're going to have these four across the top. These are your sketch aids. The only thing I really ever change here would be the stage floor. You have a circle, and you have a square, and that auto sizes based on the size of the model that you've dropped in. World axis sometimes I use if I'm tumbling the view a lot and I want to always be able to see where it's vertical, so you have the green axis there for vertical, but I don't use it that often. It's helpful though when you import models. So if you go to the prefab and you are bringing in figures, for instance, let's just say we drop in a figure here, we say yes. You see how the imported figure will be right at the 000 of the world space. So if you're bringing in a part and it's very small and you already have a model in your scene, it's going to drop that model right into there. So if this was a smaller part, for instance, it might be hidden inside here, right? It would be down inside the vehicle, maybe just below the floor right down here with its center. So if it was, sitting on the ground before, it would sit on the ground, or if it was floating off the ground, it will remember the position when you made the prefab. It will remember its position relative to the world space. So world space is important for that matter. A lot of times it helps me to find the parts when I'm importing them from the prefab library. So that's pretty helpful to know is where is your 0 point in your scene. I never use these to zoom in or out. This I use all the time. I think vertical locked is default, but I really feel that in order to do longer hours and to be more comfortable in VR space, having vertical locked is very helpful. And then I do a lot of symmetry because I'm doing products that are symmetrical. So a lot of times that's turned on. I don't usually have it visible, but you can see that you can make it visible. Here it is as a ghosted plane. And there are a couple of different styles. I think one is relative to the model or world space. I'm not sure about the other. Looks like, and I think it's relative. Oh, this is relative to my model. Looks like this edge of the paper here is defining, and then this edge is defining. This one is based on world space. It seems to have no relation to the objects, but it's related to the stage floor, which is also centered there. So, but typically don't really have it on. I just use that button. Okay, surface contours, all the rest I leave default. This is a pretty nice one though. If you want to start moving an object in a different axis, so if it's off, smart move, you won't be able to constrain the direction you're moving an object. Here's the default, which is XYZ. So what you do is that you align your controllers one right behind the other. And when I click on the selection sphere, which is this little ghosted sphere by my dominant hand, and I'm right-handed, so I'll say my right hand. So when I intersect a surface, you'll see it goes red. It tells me that it is selected. Okay. Now, if my controller is not behind the other one and it's selected, I won't have a constrained line pop up. You'll see there's nothing. Then I bring my controller in behind it, and as soon as you get close enough in this sort of general range, and they're both pointed the same direction, okay, whatever you have selected, I could select all of this, for instance, then you can move along that constraint. And I can go vertical, for instance. I'd have to go, let's go a little larger so I can see the line. So there we go. So there's the green line shows up. I can move this up and down. Now, as soon as I start moving, I can move my non-dominant hand out of the way. It doesn't matter. It's going to stay on the line. And also it's going to show you the actual dimension that you're moving this up and down. So say you want to put something out of the way to move something, you might want to move it up and just remember, oh, I moved it, 1.2. And then when you go to move it back, right, you can go down 1.2. And there we go. And you don't even have to eyeball it. You can just use the numbers. So that's pretty convenient. So the constraints I use all the time. And you'll just get used to aligning your model, and boom, you can get the constraint. And then align the model, boom, there's the constraint. And there it is again. So it becomes really second nature. And that's probably the first bit of muscle memory that you'll develop when working in Gravity Sketch. Other workspace. So that's kind of this page. So, the smart move X. This is all axes. So if I want to move something diagonally, you'll see I get this gray line now that pops up, and I can aim the gray line, right, to move something off axis that's not lined up with the XYZ. Okay. And then the back button is the red arrow. So when you want to undo something, you just undo with the red button. Smart move mirror, smart move. So I'll leave it on XYZ. Surface contours enabled only in edit mode. So what that means is that when I pick a part and I switch to edit mode, which is hitting the blue button, so you hold, it's kind of like rubbing your head and your stomach at the same time. So you need to hold the object with the selection sphere. Then you press the blue edit button. And when you do that, it will snap back to its original position. So don't worry when you grab and select something and you hit the inside grab. Let's do that again. So I'm selected here because the sphere is on it. Now I have to hit the inside trigger on my right hand, my dominant hand, okay, in order to grab it, right? And that's going to become second nature. That's how you grab and manipulate parts in space. Now to edit while holding it, before you let go of the inside button, hit the blue button on your left or non-dominant hand, and that will switch you to edit mode. Once you're in edit mode, then you'll see all the vertices that make up that geometry. And then selecting and moving them is exactly the same as selecting and moving the part. You select it with the selection sphere, grab it, inside trigger, and move. Okay. We can also move these with the constraints. So there I can move vertically constrained. I can move forward and back, right? And of course I can move in and out. And then I can undo each of those by hitting the red button. Okay, if you want to switch, we'll wait on the switching that. Sub D I showed yesterday how to turn that on and off quite a bit. Okay, workspace. So that's it for number one. Grid density does exactly what it says. If you want to turn on the grid, you hit this button, which I use occasionally, especially for architecture and things that really need to be XYZ aligned to the world space. You'll see if I draw there, it'll snap between points. That's the on-off for that. Grid density is exactly that. The higher up you go, the smaller the grid gets. Pretty much do nothing on this one. I leave it all default. Here's where you can change your units to inches versus metric. This one, workspace, which I guess was probably technically the question up there. Workspace, here's your preset, which is just this gray top straight down lighting. If you want to change the lighting and you start in this preset, you just grab the flashlight with your selection sphere, pull it off, okay? And you can position it wherever you like. Now you'll see that the light is actually independent of the world space. So what it means is that this light is like it's acting like it's in a virtual room, right, and staying fixed. And we're actually manipulating the model relative to the light. Okay, so then the model includes that piece of paper over there, the whole scene. If you don't want that, and you want to feel like you're moving the camera and not the model, grab the light, position it wherever you want relative to the object, then hit this little anchor, hit the blue button on your left hand. Boom. Okay, now you'll see that the light is actually moving. And the way it's easier to look at this is not that it's pivoting or anything. Just look at the shadow. Right now I'm moving the model. The shadow is not moving on the ground, which means the light is staying the same angle relative to our model. And so now it feels like I'm moving the camera. I'm not moving the light. Okay. So that's how you have two options there for light control. If you want to put it back, you just anchor it again. Okay, now it's the default. And so a lot of times I will unlock that and leave it unlocked. Now, if I get rid of this by hitting the menu button to make it go away, I still see the light. So how do I hide that? You just grab it and hit the red button to delete it. It will then anchor it back to the menu. So I would just go through these, play with them a bit, see what you prefer. I tend not to work in this one ever, or this one that often. I tend to really go down here and do my custom 3 gradient, but I'm changing these gradients all the time. There's no right or wrong. It's just what looks good relative to the surfaces and colors you're using. Shadows I usually have in the middle position. This will really help performance though. If you want to do a lot of modeling and your modeling is getting kind of heavy, then take and turn off the shadows. I don't know what's the difference honestly between floor shadows. This must be for one of the other scenes where the floor is visible. But in the middle mode is where I leave it. I don't use the floor grid much at all. HDR, what that means is that when you have a reflective surface, let's just make this a little bit more reflective. Let's take this. I'm going to grab it, and then you can just, while you're holding down the grab tool or the grab button, you can move the eyedropper in and out. You can pick different colors. So you can pick colors and then values you slide in and out. Okay, so let's do something like that. Now I want to make it reflective. I'll grab it again, hit the color palette. So don't worry that it's moving, right? As soon as you hit the color palette tool, it's going to snap back to its original position. You go up here and you click on these spheres above. Basic, reflective, toon material, the flat. Flat is good for like a fake glowing polygon, honestly, because there's no shading at all on it. And then clay. Clay is probably the most sort of easy to look at on the eyes, but reflective will do here. Now you see it actually looks very, very flat. And the reason for that is that when reflections work, they really just reflect the environment. So if you want to have environment reflections, and right now I think this is still Unity driven, is that when it reflects the environment, it doesn't reflect, like for instance, that big white piece of paper with a bunch of text. You don't see that reflecting on the windshield, right? It's because it doesn't reflect other objects in the environment, doesn't reflect the floor, for instance, here, the stage floor. All it reflects is the HDR, which is the surrounding values and gradations. So you'll see here I have a 3 color. So it's sort of dark blue, light blue at the horizon, and light gray below. And if we come in here, right, it's not, of course, reflecting itself into these panels. It's only reflecting the surrounding gradation. So think of it as you're inside a big sphere, and it's going to reflect what's below and beyond your scene. So if you have a lot of things around this, that may not work great in an interior, for instance, because we don't see any of the gradations in our environment. So I'd probably not use the HDR shading for a reflective surface in an indoor environment. But for outdoor, we still see a lot of the sky. So if I look from over here, seeing the blue sky on the tops of these surfaces works really nicely. And seeing this light value underneath these undercuts also works nicely. And the way I did that, right, is just made it this light gray below. So you can now come back in here and you can play with your gradations. Let's say I want to intensify that, hint that it's really on something white. Just pull that all the way up to white. So that's our straight down. That's our nadir. Our zenith is here and the horizon's there. So we could start to change our environment, change the colors. If you really want to see the reflective surface more easily, then increase the contrast of your 3 different values here. So I could, for instance, make this white, but then I won't have much contrast at all, of course, between the horizon and down below. And then if I switch this to black, okay, now you'll see I'm starting to get nice contrast between the horizon and straight down is black. And so you'll see through here, I'm very able to see all the imperfections in the surface. So we'll put it back to something a little bit more natural. Let's pull this a little bit brighter. Let's take this, make it a little bright horizon. Let's take this, make it even a little bit darker blue. So there we go. And blue on blue, of course, doesn't look great. So you could just go and change the color of this. Of course, we can go lighter, darker. If you go black, you're really going to show the imperfections. Let's go all the way black. Now you can see over here, if I was going to make this a tighter model, I've got this change right through there in value. So you can see I've got a dip right through there, and I've got a little bit of work to do around this, depending how quickly I want this little bone line to fade out. And that would be the next level of modeling. I'm getting off track. So let's go. Okay, let's see. I've lost my material, the yellow. It's no longer here as one of the ones I can select. So how do I get it back? Okay, you need to bring back the eyedropper. So there's a little thing called a tool belt. And when you sign up for Landing Pad, you'll have access to the tool belt. Now the tool belt has a bunch of other beta tools on it. And so here's an eyedropper. You can just grab it again with your selection tool. Just grab it. And I say, I want to sample that yellow. Now I've sampled the yellow. And now I grab the paintbrush, okay, and I want to apply it to that exterior. So you just grab it, you intersect it with the surface. Zoom in here. You just take just a small corner because you don't want to go too far. You'll get all the other surfaces. Okay, and we can undo that. So just enough to engage the one you want, and then you click your index finger. It will apply the color. So now you have the color and the material are back. Okay, and to get rid of this, you just swipe away. So to bring it forward, it's hidden all the time. You just swipe like this, holding the inside trigger, and swipe back. Okay, I think that covers the workspace. This one was just some defaults. I always have a tool belt turned on, contextual measurements, I always have that enabled, and the grid, I always have that enabled. So that's really the whole rundown of my workspace. That was I'm sure I hopefully covered a few of the other questions on that first one. Is there a way to add some basic functionality to the model, like a pivot point to open doors? That would be really cool, and that's an excellent idea and suggestion. I think that is on the list. That would effectively be something like a locator in a polymodeling program like Modo or Maya, but there are ways to do certain things. So for instance, if I engage this move tool with a surface, okay, let's do, well, because this door is not separate. Let's do something. That's all right. We'll just pivot the whole thing. So if I click and engage it, it will set that tool. I'm holding my inside trigger finger still. Okay, and now I can use this to constrain and move, just like I use the controllers. So you don't have to use the controllers for a constrained move, but I find that it's faster and more intuitive if you're doing X, Y, Zs. Where it's really nice is when you click and then you hit one of these little squares, it will constrain it on a plane. So this is the XZ plane. And so it's the red-blue plane here, and it's staying on that plane, and I can just slide things around. This is really convenient when doing things like furniture, and you want to move things around a scene quickly. Then I find using that and hitting the plane and you can just, because otherwise you have to go X, then Z, and back and forth, back and forth. This is a great shortcut. Now, I thought I saw Emil or, yeah. Okay, so you can position the center for the pivot point. So say I wanted to pivot this door open, I would put it like somewhere there. Okay, so you do that by grabbing the center. I activate it with the center, with the forward. I'm still holding the inside trigger, and I activated it with my index finger. Now I can grab this and I can pivot like so. I'm going to undo it, and let's see if it remembers. No. So you have to just locate it each time. But let's say you were staging something and you wanted to open some of these elements, then for sure you could take it, and let's say we had the rear hatch here. I want to take the rear window. I'm going to now move this position, and because I'm in stereo vision, actually it's snapping to the surface, which is really cool. So I'm snapping to the surface. I'm going to go right up here where I think there's going to be some sort of hinge. Whoops, forgot to activate. So grab the square, the cube, I should say. Before you let go, grab the ring you want, and let's open the rear hatch. Okay, and then let's undo that. That's super cool. Okay. It doesn't remember those, unfortunately, but maybe in the future that'd be a great thing to add, which is it could remember the locators. Would I agree that clay modelers are perhaps more suited for sketching and concept surfaces over flat monitor digital modelers because they're familiar with modeling concept in true 3D space? That's a yes and a no. So they're going to be really used to, because I've done a lot of clay modeling in the past as well, and I think where a clay modeler will have an advantage or be more familiar, let's say, is in sighting a line. And so what I mean by that is that you can see that this window has got some problems in the surface right through here. See a little gradation change? That's a wobble. That's going to give you a really poor reflection when we go into the next step into a sub-D poly modeling program. And so you'd be like, well, how do I fix that? How do I know where that's wrong? It's so subtle, right? So, but if you know how to sight the surface, and what I mean by that, sighting a surface is usually getting your line of sight. Let's look at the windshield compared to the top header here, is when you get your line of sight parallel to the surface, and then you start just moving the surface a little bit, and you can start to see little dips and hollows where you need to fix those surfaces. And it's much easier to see in a reflective surface. Let's take the glass, let's make it totally opaque. Okay, and now I can see that there are definitely some wobbles in there. Now, part of the wobbles could be because we don't have enough geometry. So I may not have enough resolution to give me a nice smooth shape. Or I may have the resolution, but I have the wrong topology. And so I have a lot of really long lines here, but I don't really have enough lines maybe going the other way. Also, this window is a little tricky because it's twisting, and that's really kind of a no-no to control the reflection through there. So I probably have to constrain that somehow and say, well, I want to keep this angle at the A-pillar and then run that back. So I might need to pull out this back corner a little bit to make that plane a little bit more consistent. And you can see the back corner is dipping inward through here. And if I adjusted that to improve the quality of that surface, then I want to come back after that and maybe readjust this break line because you can see now it's climbing up through here. So I'd say sighting lines is probably where 3D modelers from a traditional modeling standpoint have an advantage. Where they probably have a disadvantage is that a lot of the lines here are generated, or surfaces are generated from my drawing, right? Which is all about edges. So in traditional modeling, you can't just draw with an edge in space, right? We don't have the ability, right, to just do this. Let me make that a little bit bigger. Diameter, stroke, adjustment. Let's just make it dark. Okay, so there. The only way you get to see a line on a traditional model is that first I would have to have made a surface that was perfect, Then I could take a knife, for instance, and I could draw, or a piece of tape, and I could tape a line or draw a line, and then I could start modeling this surface across the top. Say I had extra material, or I need to have extra material. And then I can bring that surface back down to create this edge. But I never get to see the edge first. I have to have the surface first. Then I get to draw the line. Then I work back to the line. This is different in that you can float all these lines, right, in perspective first. We can make a really fast little wireframe here. I was just duplicating that, and then we could start to manipulate this. We can start to pull that and say, well, I want another line down here on the ground to work to. And I'm just starting to work my sections back to that. So we can build a wireframe extremely fast. And what this is more like is this, of course, is more like drawing. And so that's where I would say I would feel that my drawing skills are more helpful to me than my traditional modeling skills when I jump into VR. Also, when you're working with surfacing this next, it's all about poly modeling and sub-D modeling, which is very different than subtractive or additive modeling. So I would say that programs like Medium, or now Modeler from Adobe, basically any voxel-based modeling program, which this is not, it's sort of based on volumes and doing additive and subtractive work. That feels the most like clay and the most like a traditional modeling environment. This feels more like a drawing environment with then surfacing back to your drawing. And so they are fundamentally different. I enjoy both actually quite a bit. But that's my thinking behind 2D versus 3D and or 3D digital versus traditional modelers jumping into the space. Both will bring skill sets that will be helpful. It will just feel different, and both will have pros and cons. Gravity Sketch is my favorite way to create software. Yes. Does it change the way that I design and create because I'm having so much fun? And the answer is yes. Because whereas in a traditional modeling program, I would probably run out of interest because it's too labor intensive to go in and make those changes, and even to rough out surfaces or even to just do a drawing like that. The interactivity of seeing things in stereo vision makes this almost game-like, and it becomes almost addictive as well, like games, in that it's such an interactive, fun way to create forms and look at volumes. And the other thing is that relating to an object in one-to-one scale, which is a real superpower of working in VR, right? The fact that I could then go inside, let's get our glass a little transparent again. The fact I could sit in here, right? I can recline in my chair and put my hands on the steering wheel, start to figure out button placement, all that sort of thing. Say, I want something kind of there, and I need something, or latch over here, so where my hand hits the door, I want something there. So I could start marking off landmarks. That's pretty awesome. Now, how do I know I'm one-to-one scale? Well, what I usually do is that I get behind the mannequin we've put in here, and I just sort of move through the mannequin where their head is, because then it puts my head in the right spot, and now it's a scale issue. And so what I do is I look down, and I actually reach down and touch my elbow until it looks like my controller, right, is touching that elbow. And then I look up and I touch my wrist and I see, oh, is the arm the right length? And it's a little bit long here. So see where the controller takes the place of the steering wheel. And then I touch this controller, kind of the inside button is where the grab sphere is. So I know that that's where, right, my wrist is. I can feel it, and then I can feel my elbow here. And I'm pretty spot on right now, wrist to elbow, and the controller looks to be in the same spot as the steering wheel. My arms can reach it. I look down, right? Okay, that's pretty close. I may be a little bit high. Check our eye level here. Yeah, somewhere right about there, probably. I mean, the mannequin is kind of a, a rough approximation of a human figure, but you can get all the lengths that way. So that's how I move in, and I know I'm 1-to-1 scale, and then I can start to really check sight lines, things like that. I can look behind me, check out, yeah, this is a tiny car, right? You're going to be shoulder to shoulder with somebody in this. So that is how I do that. And so, yes, I think I have a lot more fun. It means I spend more time making models and realizing designs, whereas I might lose interest in another modeling program. Okay, next question. The main thing that I don't know, if it's possible to do in Gravity Sketch, is it possible to grab vertices and edges individually within the shapes or splines after putting them in the model? Yes, very much so. So let's grab this. We'll edit this entire side body. I'll switch to my control mesh mode. Makes it a little easier to see. And you can grab any of these and move those points. Of course, you can also constrain them. So there it is, a vertical constraint, horizontal, front to back. And see, it's become muscle memory for me. It's quite simple to just grab and move those around. You can start to control the fillet through here, maybe smooth out that wobble we saw earlier. And I can grab a line individually, or if I turn on this constraint, this auto select loops, you'll see it'll grab the entire line, and I can move an entire line constrained. Right? You can also do the same with faces. So if you look at the little pyramid here, the blue pyramid on my right hand, if I hit the right thumb joystick and I toggle it right, I will cycle through the different modes. So here it's everything is available. So I could pick a face. I could pick a face like this. I could pick an individual line. I can pick a vertice here, a vertex, or I can do a pair. You can do as many as you like, right? You also have a soft move, which I'll talk about in a minute. So anyway, there's everything that is points only. So it'll only grab the points, no longer the lines or the faces. This is lines only. And then this is faces only. So it won't grab the points. It'll only do the faces. And so we'll go back to everything. Now you'll see that my selection sphere here has a little ghost image around it. When you see nothing in the middle, it's a full, ghost, then it'll grab and move everything at the same rate. Okay, so see those all move the same amount. Now, if I hold my inside trigger and I use my joystick up and down, I can actually change the amount of pull that's going to happen. So now I have a soft pull, and I'm going to constrain this. And now you'll see where the center I'm grabbing is going to move more than the sides of the sphere. So that's if you wanted to do a sort of a gross move to an area, meaning a large move here, but I didn't want to influence the rest of it, or I wanted it to have like there was just a dip, or you wanted to create a bump, and you wanted to do it in a smooth fashion, right? Then I could influence, say, just this part of the break line here. Let's switch it over like that. You can see the sub D. So I have a nice smooth transition. Let's undo that, and let's go back to the hard selection. Let's go to the same area. And if I pulled all of those, you'll see now it just pulls straight out equally. Now, of course, it's still a nice smooth transition because it's in sub D mode. But so that answers that one. The answer is yes. You can grab them individually. You can grab them however you like. There are some limitations, right? Because you're still limited to the grab sphere and how it engages. You can't change yet the sphere into a cube, for instance. How do I approach panel lines in 3D? Okay, so panel lines. Oops, looks like I've got a little bit of something to fix there. Let's just go fix that. So let's turn off that. Looks like I've added a little extra row somewhere along the line of polygons. So I could choose to delete those. So what I'm looking at here is, you see that little step right there? I've got more than I need or not enough below. So it's a good opportunity to expand on this. So let's go in here. Ideally, we'll probably go to this mode to see what's going on with these surfaces. I might have moved it accidentally. So I probably want to adjust that. Now we can see that gap. I'm going to grab just the line. I'm going to pull it, and I'm going to grab the inside trigger to extrude. Sorry, I grab it, pull it, then I hit the front trigger to extrude the line. Now I'm just going to snap the vertex back over to the other one, and I'll go down here, and we're adding another row of polygons. So I'm just going to close up this gap a little bit, and then I'm going to extend this one down. And then I'll go cut a new line once I fix this area. So there we go. It doesn't quite line up, so just grab these guys. You can just manually move them around. You might need some more geometry through here to get the right snap. And like we can, usually you can actually get pretty close. If you started with a nice surface, then you add your cut line, you can still work with it. Okay, so how would I do a cut line to start with? Let's go here. See, my window's a little bit in the wrong spot, so let's just adjust that down so it's not intersecting. Let's grab the roof panel, and let's say I wanted to put a cut line running right along here. So let's go to the poly mode, and I would just add another edge loop like that. Then I would go to the select face mode and select the entire loop, intersect two, hit delete. Okay, now of course your topology, where your vertexes are, need to define your cut line. So you have to plan a little bit ahead. So you see over here, my topology is lined up with where I wanted the cut line. In order to do that, I had to place a couple more edge loops. Let's say I didn't want that cut line there. I might want it over here. Well, I might need to add a couple of edge loops there and then delete. Okay, now this is not going to be very nice if I go to sub D. Actually, it looks pretty good. But up here, this is a better example. See the radius that's getting formed? It's because I don't have enough resolution at the end of the line. So what you do is after you cut the line like this, you just snap in two more, like either side of your cut line, two more edge loops like that. Now we have a nice little tight radius because the points are close. These might need to get even closer, so you can just pull those closer. The closer they are, the tighter the radius will be when we go to sub D. So there you see I've sub D'd it now, and I have a nice little tight corner. And I have, two part lines. So it's all about planning your topology, and then you just delete, and you've got your cut line in 3D. Let's say you wanted to be able to just play with this separately from the rest, because you see they're still connected. If I want just this element or just the outside, what I would do is I'd just go up here, raise it up, constrain vertically, hit your index, and I've duplicated that entire panel. Now I go here. Okay, let's turn off again. Usually turn off the sub D because it actually is easier on your computer. Let's go to face constraint. Now when I pick this, I can pick the entire face, and I'm just going to delete. Let's delete these entirely. Okay, leave it up there. And you go back to this one. Let's turn that off, and let's pick an entire loop. Let's constrain it to the face. Okay, now we could pull this one back down to line up with the other. Okay, and that gives me control when I edit now. I can edit just this strip. I can also apply a separate color to that, and I can independently subdivide it because I detached them. Even though they're on the same layer, it does not remember the history of its neighbor, which is what will happen if you just delete a line. And here you can start to fine tune your cut lines, all that good stuff. So that is how you deal with parting out your pieces and working with cut lines. Gravity Sketch seems like the most fun way to create in 3D in my experience, as the fun made to design a different way. Software tools, technique, translation. Yeah, I think that I answered this one a little bit in the middle up here, this guy, about software and how I feel emotionally about designing in it. I think fun goes a long way, and people have forgotten a lot about how to play. And so I think if you can bring play back into the creative process in any way, then it really opens you up to making new discoveries. And I always learn something and discover something in the modeling process as I'm building shapes. Then you start to see things. So one of my students has a great saying that if you want to be creative, just create. So what he means by that is just start, right? So even this, I start to see things in this little wireframe. And you can start just playing and moving around points and adding other shapes, right? And you're like, oh, that looks like X to me, right? Whatever X might mean. And then I want to see if I could make this, can I add another line through here? And how could I make that curve work? And so you start to just play, right? And then and that's how you extend. You just go off the end of your curve and you just click with your index finger again, and you can add more points. Of course, you can snap those around. All right, and then you start making discoveries. And you might just come up with something here that maybe it's not relevant even for this current project or what your initial expectation was, but you can save it as a prefab, and then you can go back to it at a later date. Oh, snap it to center. Again, yes, very much a believer in the power of playing, especially in 3D, because that's a lot of what we create. And this is where I think the drawing ability comes in. And you see that, I know that if I'm going to add a section through here, it has to go through that other red section if I want it to create and define a common surface. So and you will see that little peak that's starting to show up when I get further away. So bing, bing, right? When you get too far away, the splines will become faceted and get simplified. You'll see that happening to more of them. So just be aware of that. So don't try to go far away like this and evaluate those lines, because the resolution goes down as you get further away. That's where I think using a line drawing before you start your model is better. So there's still resolution limitations to the rendering engine. You can open up a quad view here. So I can just grab let's take this view right here. Okay, so that's the view from behind. There we go. So I could just float this in the space, and then as I make changes, the way you have to do it is just like the light, you have to unanchor it. Or does it only? I thought there was a way to unanchor that. Anyway, when I make changes here in the model, like so, you see them changing over there in the draft view. The problem with that for me is that it's too low res, right? I can't actually get a distance view and put it far away and then see it and make my changes, which I have to do closer here and see the change there. So, and even if I bring this closer, right, it's very low res. And so it's difficult to use. So I haven't found that being super helpful yet. If you want to undo this edit, you're hitting the back button, it's not working. You have to select it, and then you can undo the edit. Okay, you need to be back in the edit mode where you created the problem in order to fix the problem. Unless it was just moving apart. If you're moving apart, you're not in edit mode, you can go back on that. But if I moved it in edit mode, I need to go back into edit mode to undo the move. All right, well, that was pretty long-winded, but there you go. One page done. I'm obviously going a little bit deeper because some of these things warrant that. So let's bring in the next. I had a hard time getting dimensions and sizes right. Any tools for making sure things are sized correctly? Okay, what I tend to use are two things. Three things, actually. You can use the prefab library. And so let's say I could make a cube let's just do that. Let's turn on the grid. Let's go here. We're going to select a cube. Just put it in subdivision mode. Might be easier to adjust. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to turn on the grid. 20 centimeters. And we don't really need to mirror it. Let's see, I don't think we need anything else. Let's just zoom in here. I can now see the grid points starting to show up. And let's see, there's my cube. So I just made a 20 centimeter cube. All right, so if you, and then you could change your grid densities here, 5, 10, 20. I can turn off the grid now. If I wanted to make it any other size cube, I could also do that. But I think this is one way to do it. So you could bring in a constraint from another 3D program as an OBJ. It will remember the true scale of it. Or you could use the grid, which says 20 centimeters. You can check it with a tape measure. So there's a tape measure on the tool belt, the far right. So if I knew the wheel dimension here, the diameter, I could check it against with the tape measure. So I use either the tape measure to measure out a couple of elements to start with. So set your proportions from the beginning. Like I might set a cube as my proportional guide throughout the entire build. But usually I use the human scale. I think I mentioned this a little bit in my webinar yesterday. It's 166 centimeters tall. So you could scale and say, well, I want to do something that's a little bit taller person, more, a little bit larger percentile to fit more people, let's say. So I want to build with a bigger figure, knowing that I have more interior space to work with. Then you could bring up your tape measure. You can measure the height of this person. Right now, this person's about 6 feet tall. So there we go. So that now I have a 6-footer. You could say, okay, well, I have a 6-foot person. I want to now save that as a prefab. So I can go back to the prefab menu, go here, grab this. And when I grab it, it will activate and say, drop stuff here to make prefab. Great. I'm going to drop it right there. I'm going to call this, clear that, 6-foot guy, and done. All right. So now if I go through here, eventually I will find, see I have a bunch of prefabs. I will go through here and I'll find my 6-foot guy. It's alphabetical, but I don't know where 6 shows up. Is it at the very beginning? Or is it at the very end? Maybe it was at the very beginning. I missed it. I'm not really taking time to read. Just hoping to see the guy. There he is. He was at the very beginning. So what you do is you put your pointer, as soon as you get close, the little pointer will extend from your dominant hand. You activate that 6-foot guy. You grab it with your grab sphere. Okay. Don't just grab it and pull it in. If you do that, it's just going to be whatever the scale was here in the viewer. So obviously that's not a 6-footer. So it's not do it that way. You grab it, you put it over here to preview. When you preview, okay, it is going to show you where it is. Did it remember? It did not remember my scale. Okay, good to know. Don't do that. So it did not remember how much I scaled this when I made my prefab, because that's the one we loaded in, and when I loaded it back, it did not remember. What about the cube? Let's try that. The cube should work. It must have a built-in memory because it's a mannequin and it's posable. I bet it defaults to a different, now we know it's alphabetical. We'll just call this A. Let's load that. Let's drop it here. Yep, it says 20 centimeters. Now, where did it go? Remember I talked about earlier? It's way down inside. It's going to be at the world. No, it's actually right on top of this one because it will remember the world space. So now, unfortunately, we have 2 cubes right on top of each other. And I'm probably not going to be able to get that one to, let's move it out here, duplicate it. Okay, there's our original. Let's delete that. Let's load this one. There we go. Okay, And yes, it came in. It did remember our scale. So I would assume that it's okay for parts that you create or parts that come in via OBJ from another app, but the mannequin seems to have a memory for its original size. So just be warned. But easy enough to scale. Looks like our mannequin guy is about 5'5", maybe. Okay, let's get rid of those. Get rid of the cubes. Is there a way to snap objects to another object's surface? Not objects that I know of. So maybe let's bring back the cube. So if I go here to edit, it's going to allow me to edit the points on it, but I don't think it will allow me to edit, like you can't set a center to the bounding box bottom of this yet, and then put it over here on the roof and have it snap to that. I don't believe that works. You can snap the surface to that, no problem, but it's going to be modifying the shape of this red cube, for instance. It's not going to be pulling all the other surfaces with it. Not yet. That would be a great constraint to have. Computer hardware GPU is required. I mean, that's a good technical question on the Discord for Shay, and Jaron can definitely answer that about what's the minimum. I don't know what the minimum is. I think you definitely having one good video card is the key. So you can run with but I think you can go all the way down to like a 1080. But if you're on a Quest 2, it's full standalone. You don't even need a PC. So, and you can send all your models to the cloud. Should you want to load them later onto a PC, but you don't, it's not even required. But if you want to do the heavier compute with the cast shadows, the reflections, all that good stuff, the full, all the full capabilities, I think one good video card is enough. But yeah, check with Gravity Sketch, ask on the Discord. Somebody should give you the specs for that. I'm running my headset, by the way, off of one dedicated RTX 2080 Ti from NVIDIA, and I have 3 in my machine, one of which has just gone down, so I have now 2, but one is running now, one monitor, and the other one I always have a dedicated card just for the headset because I get the best performance. It doesn't overheat, the fan never kicks on, stays nice and quiet. Is there a Slack or Discord community? Yes, I know there is a Discord. I don't know about the others. Coming from sculpting with ZBrush or Medium VR, it feels very slow to do concepts with Gravity Sketch. So I need to see tips to explore forms faster. Yeah, I've done a lot of work in Medium as well, less so in ZBrush. I have done that sort of modeling on Nomad Sculpt and Forger on an iPad Pro, and those have been really fun to use. I would say that those two, that type of modeling, super high-res mesh modeling, which is ZBrush, or the voxel-based modeling, which is Medium, and also now Modeler from Adobe. And also you can do, there are others that exist in VR, but that is the most similar to Clay because it's additive and subtractive, and you start with volumes, right? So you're just building out big volumes. Where it gets to be very difficult to do something fast in those types of models are to do controlled surfaces. So I know to do something like this panel, or even this panel through here, with controlled radiuses and fillets and really nice surfacing, I don't think I could actually build that to that level in Medium, for instance. So, it's kind of can't really happen, honestly. So they're very different. But I've done some really fun organic modeling in Medium, and it just depends how high resolution your machine can handle going with the voxel cloud in order to do really mechanical presets. The cool thing about doing the mechanical stuff in Medium is you can import the OBJs. Like say you made a bunch of things in ZBrush, export them as OBJs. You can bring them in as modifiable meshes into Medium, just like you can here. But over there, they're actually, it'll convert to a cloud, a voxel cloud that you can start to manipulate. So I would say do both. I like them both. Not wearing glasses in my headset Do I have any issues with not using them? No. And because the reason I wear glasses is just because I'm getting old, and so I have the inevitable softening of my focus, and so they're just magnifiers. My glasses are like a +2 now. So since this is already kind of fuzzy in this environment, having it be a little more fuzzy is not really a big deal, as compared to the hassle of trying fitting your glasses into the headset every time you take the headset on and off. So far so good. It's still acceptable resolution for me to model. At some point, I probably will have to put on my glasses in the next few years, probably. So thanks for reminding me. How long are my sessions in VR? I tend to, I just sometimes they're short, 15, 20 minutes. You jump in between meetings. You can jump in really quickly. And I love that about VR is you can jump in. I set my timer on my Apple Watch, and I can have a reminder of when my next meeting's coming. So I set it before I jump in. I just jump in. I get into modeling or just exploring and playing with shapes. And then bing, I'm been reminded I need to jump out, pull off the headset, exit, jump onto my call. I'm done with the Zoom, back into VR. So they can be really short and spontaneous, which is great fun. It doesn't take much to load up a model. But on the long side, I think I don't run more than about 3 hours for a single session. That's kind of when I just can't take, I have to stand up and move around and, rest my eyes a bit. So somewhere in between there. Quick to max 3 hours. Do I get eye strain from staring at the VR goggles or works? No eye strain. The only thing that happens is my eyes get a little bit dry. But quite honestly, sometimes if, I blow a fan towards me while I'm in headset to try and cool down the sweaty head, forehead. But actually, I think the sweat makes it higher humidity environment, which keeps your eyes a little bit, a little bit more moist. So it's not always awful to have the sweat. But just dry eyes. It's a little bit more strain than working on a flat screen, but honestly, my eyes at the end of the day both feel tired, whether I'm working on a flat screen or I'm working in VR. Wish we had a gray floor. Okay, no problem. So let's just get rid of the stage floor. It's gone. Now we have no floor. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make this cube our floor. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to delete this set of points below. Okay, and now we just have the 4 points. And I'm just going to move these out. Now you'll see it's impossible for me with my handle here to grab both of those points and pull them back. So you grab the line and pull. And here you take the line and pull. Okay, and then we'll undo that. And now we're already at the right height, actually. But we can adjust the height here as we like. So I'll intersect the tires a little bit to show a little bit of weight in the car. And now we can change the color because it is its own piece of geometry. So you wanted gray. So there we go. There's gray. I'll show you another cool trick. So the other thing you can do is you can assign a texture to that. We're going to lose something and we're going to gain something and we're going to lose something. See, this has a nice cast shadow on it. Right now, if we put a texture on this ground plane, we're going to lose the shadows on the ground plane. But I have made these textures. So if you grab it, and it has a nice blurry edge, so it's going to blend into the background. So I'm just going to grab this, bring it into the scene. By bringing it into the scene, I'm going to unlock it with the anchor again. So now it stays with our scene. And now by bringing it into the scene, when I go to my color palette, I see it's a selectable material. So pick your ground, hold down the palette, pick the preset, which is the ground. Now you see it looks awful. Now, the reason it looks awful is because this is a sub D surface. We don't want to put it on a sub D surface. It won't work well. So what we want to do is put it on NURBS surface. So I'm going to delete the floor. I'm going to go back to I'm going to go here and create a new NURBS surface. I think we could we could do it one of two ways. I think we could just texture a regular cube, which will be easier for us to scale. So I think there's actually a plane here as well. Let's just take a plane. Okay, and let's go to turn on the grid. And there we go. You can see it's already texturing properly. It's just, oh, no, it did not. Did not like the plane. Oh, it's because I have sub D turned on. Be sure that is grayed out. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. Bingo. Now, go here and turn off the grid. Now go back to that plane. Now you'll see it has these preset handles, which will make it easier for me to scale than pulling edges and points. And so now I have made my own textured ground plane. Now you can see what I gave up is I lost my cast shadow on the ground. And if you go here, and I'm sure in the future this will be fixed, is that it would be great if I could pick my materials here and I would get a cast shadow, but you don't. With any of the materials, you don't get a cast shadow on textured surfaces. So you could, for instance, just darken it though, because it was light. So if it comes in lighter, then you can always go darker. You can colorize it. So there's a gray textured floor, which is nice if I'm staging a scene. And if I'm low, we can always add the shadow in Photoshop. There's another way you can add the shadow, which is to basically draw it as a plane and just treat it like a graphic. So if we had it like this, for instance, you could actually just come in here close, draw the shape of the shadow, right, with a primitive, and then just darken it and have it sit on top just slightly above the ground. Anyway, that's pretty cool. The way it's really nice is look here in my background. If I go here and I go to the camera and I go to take a photo, you'll notice now that I have a nice gradation in the background back there because we have the blur is coming from this texture map. And you'll see I have a blurry edge here. So this is just a PNG. There you can sort of see the transparency set to being transparent. When it overlaps, it reveals the transparency again. So I just have a PNG with a transparent background, and it preserves the transparency when I apply it to this plane. But it needs to be NURBS, not sub D. All right, so there you go. That was a multiple ways we can do a gray floor. Just delete that. You can delete it, by the way, and it will still be a selectable material. So you don't have to keep the swatch in there. All right, next set of questions. Constraint access, I think we've shown that multiple times. So I think we covered that one. Do you ever work more fluidly without a reference, straight sketching? Yeah, sure. I don't tend to work really as much maybe from reference. Let's bring in a prefab. What I might do is work a bit more from a base model. So for instance, I might just start out with something like wheels. Actually, I can just do it this way. I just pull apart this model. I might start out with something like this, just out of prefab, and just quickly throw in a model, maybe even no model, and just start to play around, get the tape measure out, start moving these things around, then go here. I don't tend to use the ink tool that much, but for sure you can. And I would put all that onto a separate layer. And then I would just start to sketch. And you can see, just hold down the index. Oops, let's get rid of that and turn back on. I just restarted Gravity Sketch, so I need to turn on. It's not on by default, the mirroring. So yeah, you can just start to sketch some planes. And what's nice is you just grab them, move them around. Maybe there's some sort of side scoop here, some sort of fender line, something like that. Maybe a front cowl back into there. I have tapering, you'll see, set here. If you want to get rid of the taper, you can just delete a couple of those, pull that over. You want to keep the taper over here, and then you can just edit and move those around. Let's do some sort of a center line. Doesn't matter if it's not on center, just hit it to edit, and then just constrain and pull those points, and they'll snap together. So there we have our constrained center line. If you want to edit the stroke profile, you can do that here. Make it square, diamond shape. So there it's round. We can change the size of it. Right, we can turn off the end caps. It's mirrored, that sort of thing. Of course, we can edit as well. So we could leave a little header right up there, maybe stretch the tail back here. Obviously, the more you know about the anatomy of something, the more precise this will be, and you can start to delete points if you have too many. And it's adding little bumps. So I always work with as few points as possible. And oops. So you have to hold down the index. See, I'm not very used to doing this tool. I'm more used to the point drawing, but we can put in a door opening here, for instance. Start to play with that. I mean, I don't want that one. I like to move, multiples at a time. Works well. There is a way you can apply weight to this. You can use your right joystick to change size. If you go left and right, it will change size. If you go forward and backward, it will change weight. So here you can see I'm sort of making it attracted to this point. So without having to do 3 points, I can make a hard little corner. If I go the other way, it's like it's repelling away from this corner, and it will give more tension here and here, and it'll turn this more into a straight line. So that's a way to really fast, really quickly do a, and then if you want to add a little taper, you can just do it there with your thumbstick. So for sure you can do that. I mean, it's really, really fun. And you just start moving all these elements around. You can also use volumes. So it's another way. So I would start here. We can go a little bit larger. You can constrain that with planar constraints, but I could just start here and say, well, I want this shape to do something like that. And let's do some sort of side body thing here. And let's just do a big volume and not worry about making it transparent. There's also a nice way to sort of put it underneath your line drawing. You see Emil and Jaron do this quite a bit. And they get kind of a fake looking, line drawing, and it hides the line drawing on the other side. So when you get into here, it's sort of, you don't have to have it very close, especially if you turn off shadows. These lines won't cast shadows on that. So if I change the base material to a flat material, and I just made it yellow, let's go back to flat. So there it's a flat material. And now there's no shadows on it. And it's going to look, and then if you made that the same color as your ground, like so, now we just see the line drawing, right? And this blends in with the ground. So now it really starts to look like a sketch that you might have drawn. And then you can just take a snapshot and start working over the top. So yes, for sure you can do however you like to work. There's lots and lots of ways to create volumes and shapes and lines. How do you set up the foundation with the idea of a better surface quality further in the modeling process? Okay, that's really about having as few polygons as possible. I just deleted the floor and everything. So let me bring back the floor at least. I just want to get these out of the way. Just delete that. Okay. All right, so if we look at the topology here, it's really simple, right? So what you want to do is use as few polygons as possible. The more polygons I start to put in, the more ripples and tension I start to create in the surface. So you only want to put them where you need them. So I know I need a radius here that's really tight, so there's 2 that are right next to each other. Here I want it even tighter, so there are 3 edge loops next to each other. Here a little softer, so there's 2. I have the minimum amount I need through here for this corner. Might even be able to get rid of that one. This one right here, this loop, but I probably need it at the back inside. So, these loops are helping me to hold this front edge. These guys that go to the back are helping me hold the corner inside. So I could have compressed them, consolidated, but this is not too many for a corner, especially because you can grab and manipulate them all at once. So it may look like there's a lot going on there, but there's really not that much. But what you want to avoid is like, something like this. This won't ruin it because they're all added on a straight line. But if I start to want to change something here, I'm going to get this little ripple through there, and then I'm going to be chasing it. It's going to be difficult for me to, readjust that and get rid of. Now I have lots and lots of points that can create all these little ripples down that surface. So you want to go in here and only use what you need. So I'm just taking, I'm going to delete those. So I'd say that's the way you plan ahead. It's all about topology. And as using as few polygons as possible, and only add the vertex points as needed. Surface quality, human models found with NGS. Yes, the prefabs go up to the star built-in models, and then there they are. So they're in built-in models. There's also a rigged chassis that you can do, and the chassis is pretty fun if you're into doing automotive stuff. You can just pull these around, change your wheelbase. This is an awesome thing to start with as well. So you can do all that, and it gives you the readouts of the dimensions as you adjust. See the numbers adjust. So that's pretty awesome. And again, somebody asking earlier about the question of scale. How do you ensure the scale's right? Start with stuff you know has the right scale. Let's see. There's got to be a way to grab this guy to edit. Oh, turn off the chassis, I think then. Yeah, trash. Yes. So you do it at a different menu level. But there are the people. You can bring in faces. There's a face in there. Let's go here. Let's edit. You must do it this way. Must be different. Oh, it's just on off. I don't know how to move it around. Mannequins are here. We already talked about those. So OBJ files can be pulled into KeyShot, for example. Yes, any program, polymodeling or otherwise, that reads OBJ, FBX, or IGES. So I can go to my save menu here, and this up arrow, when I'm in the save menu, is export, and I go to export. It's going to spin it around. It's going to give me the overall dimensions of my model. And then I can put it into different dimensions here, and then OBJ, FBX, or IGES are your options. And under advanced options, you can export the render sub-D or the control. The control is the poly version of the sub-D where it's faceted. And then the sub-D is the one you have that we see right now. So for instance, if we get out of there, so you see these are all sub-D in their highest resolution mode right now. So there's two more lower resolution modes, and then there's off entirely. So I tend to use either usually the highest if my machine will handle it, or off when I'm doing most of the big movements. Okay, so if I export with the render mesh, it will export this already subdivided. I tend to export with the control mesh. So export, I tend to use just the default, which is the control, because I'm going to subdivide it in the next program, in my case, Moto, and that's going to help me to have more control of the sub-D settings in that app. So I don't need that. Okay. Let's see here. Can we have another seminar for surface building with similar details? We're out of time here. Yes, I will try to do I'll try to do a demo where I take and basically record the building of something like this, and you'll see all the steps all the way through. But I'll leave that for a separate tutorial. In the meantime, I would defer you to James Robbins on YouTube. That's where I learned to do the sub-D surfacing, and he's got some very nice tutorials. Have I sculpted in clay? Yes. If so, did you find that this VR process provided the same sense of satisfaction? Mind-numbing speed to the changes to not. I mean, it's definitely different. I would say if you want to have the feeling of sculpting and get as close to the satisfaction of manipulating a clay surface, I would work in medium. I think that, or any voxel-based modeler is going to give you that feeling and the satisfaction to feel much more like you're manipulating clay. Is this process only a step to improve speed to real-world clay and prototype, or to do art to part? I don't really understand that one. Art to part, maybe it's the sort of vernacular of that modeling world. I think it is for sure a step, and then you could, of course, make this watertight. You can cut these surfaces, right? You could 3D print them. You can cut them CNC, so you could cut into a clay. There have been a couple of nice case studies of a company that built a full size from their gravity sketch model and then hand finished the clay as a result. So I would say it's a step in the process. This is not the end all model by any means. I would say it's the fastest model and the most fun model I can do to get me to pre-visualize a result. But normally I just finished doing a model with Crypto Motors, and we took my gravity sketch model and then it went into Alias, and a Class A automotive modeler from a professional car company, he remodeled it. So he retopoed it. So I would expect that this is just a step almost always, and it would always get retopoed in the next program down the line, because you can't really evaluate this in the proper rendering environment to see all the imperfections. But it's an amazing way to start. Would I change the content of my How to Draw book if assuming students will have access to Gravity Sketch? Yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm putting all this effort into figuring out Gravity Sketch and working in it so much, is either How to Draw 2 someday would come out and include all this VR drawing knowledge, or I would do on a reprint of How to Draw, maybe I add an extra chapter, but that book is already long enough. So I think I would save this for How to Draw 2. So I think all these exercises and experimentation I've been doing are heading sort of towards that, towards another textbook. But I think people still sort of early days for VR. You look at the size of the community, it's small. So I think there need to be more people in headset, and needs to be a bit more mainstream. But it would definitely be a chapter in a book. Okay, last page. Let's see if I've got the voice left for this one. After not talking much during the pandemic, I'm noticing that these lectures and things are a little harder for me to do nowadays. All right. Do you have any advice for warming up? Just doing some sections, I guess. What to create, where to start. My approach to that is I totally agree with you. That I agree. If you don't have a preconceived idea, it is hard to know where to start. So what would I do in that case? Honestly, I think I might jump out onto a piece of paper with a pen or a pencil and just scruff around some ideas, because drawing on paper in 2D is still faster than working here. Yeah, you're not getting all the 3D information, but you don't need it early on. So early on, I think the exploration is fantastic in 2D and far faster and more interactive in a way and immediate than it is here. I'm really, the immediacy doesn't come into play because this is just equally as fast to see a line. But to see the overall shape of something simply and graphically, I find that I'm better with traditional media than I am here. It's a little bit harder to evaluate in 3D space, those early graphic decisions about proportion. So I would jump on a piece of paper. If you need to find, maybe jump in and do some research. What I mean by that is do some design research, find something that inspires you, make up a fake project, look online, see who else is doing cool stuff, maybe do a variation on something like that. That's what I would do. Could you share a bit of your process in creating standard features like surfaces, like fillets, bevels, and such? I'll save that for the surfacing tutorial, but it's a lot of what I've already shown you. Any plans for VR workshops? Not yet. Not really doing stuff out in public yet because of the pandemic. But for sure at Art Center, you guys should be doing tons of gravity sketch, quick sketches. Your reference images from the side view, do you ever then pull out another viewpoint, maybe the front and back, combine the two? Yeah, you don't have to, you can work from whatever you want, but I find that I can do the front view and the rear view in Gravity Sketch. Not that this rear view is very connected to this, side body, but it's very modular in this case. This one's got a little bit more connection through some of these break lines through here. But this is very much a sort of front, side, rear design, and that you have sort of like all the fascia design happening within some limited, constraints of the side body line. And even graphically, there are different colors. Of course, we could make it the same color if we want to see that. It's this one. And it totally changes the proportions and the weight and feel of the front end. So yes, whatever works, and it's not always the side view, right? If you know mostly about what you want the top view to look like, then draw the top view and bring that in and start working in that view. So you're not view constrained. And it doesn't really matter where you work. You can work here in full 3D space and work out the design that way. I have another version of this car. I've already reworked the whole nose area in another version of this one. And I did that all in VR. Usually what I do is, and I think I even have a layer here, drawing number 2. So you'll see here, drawing number 2, there are new lines that are more precise, that are the lines I use to refine the design. So I discovered this little point here in drawing number 1, right? It just started showing up through trying to do the topology through here, and then I wanted to emphasize it a bit. It wasn't in my original sketch. This was in my original sketch, but this wasn't. And then I just saw it as I was modeling. It was sort of almost a mistake. It was giving me a little shadow, and I was like, oh, I kind of like to extend that. So you'll see this red line I added is in my second line drawing. See, there it is. And I get rid of the first one. So after I block in my surfaces, then I jump in and I do sort of like line drawing number 2 is then using the surfaces as reference when I draw. And what I'm trying then to do is smooth out the surfaces using a guideline. So you'll see these guidelines, the red ones, and I also moved this door cut. The door cut used to be down here, but I thought it might look better if it aligned with this sculpted bone line here. So I sort of extended it through, and then you can see that's where the new cut line is. So wherever I want to refine surfaces here, I wanted to make a connection from this corner all the way through behind this little rail. I don't even know what this rail is for, but so you see I drew a line through there. And this is kind of the next, and these weren't aligning in the first time. So I stretched a line here to align those edges. And there's a section through there. So drawing number 2 usually gets its own layer and is all about refining the surfaces with more lines. We'll be able to create with this and export to softwares like, I don't know 3D Vista, but if it reads an OBJ, an FBX, or an IGES, the answer is yes. Don't have any preparation on 2D Sketch or similar. I've just had some experience SolidWorks and Inventor for college and for fun. Do I worry now or will I be okay? That's kind of a big question. I'm glad it's the last question. But 1, I think you'll be okay. 2, don't worry whether you have not worked in a program like this before. I would say in the context of CAD modeling programs, this is one of the easiest I've ever worked in. The Gravity Sketch team, the dev team, and designers have done a really nice job with the UI. Everything's really clean. You can peel off these menus, for instance, should you want to take say you're readjusting your lines all the time, you can put them around. You can leave that up in your scene, and you can be making your adjustments, switching between your tools quickly, so you can float these menus around. I don't know if there's a way to anchor that to your model view. No, it doesn't move with the model, but you can peel them off. If you want to make them go back, you just delete, and it will snap back to your non-dominant hand. So the UI is really elegant, and they've done a very nice job at, you can change opacity of things. You can merge layers just by grabbing two things and connecting them together. All right, I think that is the questions I had been sent by Jaron that were left on the chat that I didn't answer during the webinar. So thanks everybody for joining in. I thought it was a lot of fun. I think ultimately we had a couple thousand people that registered, so that was great. And it was super exciting to see at the very beginning when people were saying hello, to see where everybody was from, because people were from all over the world. So that was fun for me to see that people show up from all over to learn about this fun new way of working and building models and doing design work in VR. So glad you enjoyed it. Try to find somebody with a headset or some place you can try a headset. Maybe you can sneak into a Best Buy and download Gravity Sketch, put it on there, and give it a try in the store, worst case. So be well, stay safe, and try to get into VR. I think you'll find it's super fun. Bye-bye.